So let me introduce going down the line. So Jason, who is just on stage, Jason Furlano, he is the SVP of Commercial for MIQ. Joshua Nathan, the Director of Partnerships at the Trade Desk. What? You two switch.
Okay.
Your mics are switched. No, it's all good. It's because of the miking, I've been told. So Scott Mitchell, who is the Managing Director for Vistar Media in Canada. And then our gracious advertiser joining the panel with all the service providers. So we have Danyal Syed Ali. He is I always get this wrong, Daniel. You are the head of consumer and customer insights at IKEA Canada. All right, so thank you guys for joining us. I'll be honest, Jan stole a lot of my thunder for my setup, so we're going to leave it with her because it's so beautifully articulated. But let's give a bit of context for what we're trying to get to. And because the years have progressed, almost 3 years, there we go. All right, I think it's safe to say that to everybody in the room, we've all been seeing a lot of changes over the past few years on how we're consuming media and how we're actually receiving advertising messages. It's actually generating a lot of conversation in the industry, even some conversation as to what is the best channel to reach the Canadian audiences. What's the best medium to do so? And as a geographer and as a data-driven insights analyst, I will just say, it depends on who you're trying to reach, why you're trying to reach them, and the message and the creative that you have. But it's still a debate that's raging. In addition, we're seeing conversations around cookie deprecation. There is the importance of social responsibility in the environment. We're looking at new technology coming into the industry. We have a new media channel that 5 years ago was just a blip on the Canadian landscape and is now actually challenging a lot of traditional media. All of these topics are generating questions that the panelists have had to deal with in their everyday life, and questions that our advertiser clients are also dealing with. That's why this group of experts are going to be touching on these topics, and they're also going to be sharing with them, all of us, their ideas on where activation is going in Canada. Okay. So let's do a little level setting question and start with something simple. Quickly, I know all of you, quickly, can you give us a straightforward answer on what you think is activation? And Scott, I'm going to start with you.
All right, thank you. So from a digital out of home perspective, activation, and obviously an emerging channel as we think of software in a very traditional space, is the ability to seamlessly take your data-driven strategies and start to apply them to out of home and enable marketers to have the ability to create more of an omni-channel lens for reaching audiences across every single one of their efforts, and enabling that to be driven through out of home, as well as the opportunity to add measurement to that as well.
Jason, what would you add?
Yeah, to add to that, I think the omni-channel approach is quite important to that. And it's not only about the activation element. I think the activation component of that is so important. But at MIQ, we utilize our Environics Analytics partnership actually to feed into the planning process. So we're making sure that we're as effective and efficient out of the gates as is humanly possible. The activation, of course, so enriching that through data and intelligence and technology platforms that then place the right ad at the right moment. But most importantly, and the theme will come up a lot today, is then measurement. So what do we do with all of that data, those insights, and how do we make them actionable for the next campaign,
Okay. Danyal, you are our advertiser. A lot of the people in this room is going to resonate with what you're going to say. Activation, what does it mean to you?
I think Jan stole a lot of my speaking points as well. So at the risk of not sounding redundant, I think when it comes activation for us internally, we think about it in a framework which really comes down to understanding, activating, and measuring. And activating is the ability to be able to recreate and replicate our target consumer audiences, segments, however you want to call it, and then reaching them in the right moment and through the right relevant marketing channels and touch points.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, as we all know, media consumption and media patterns have been changing the past few years. If we think back to 5 years ago and you'd watch Game of Thrones on your HBO, on your TV, and your kids would be in their room being mad at mom and dad on their cell phones. 2.5 years ago, a lot of things changed in the industry. A lot of things changed in our houses and how we actually started to consume media. And these changes are actually changing where we're going into the future. And I hope, and I know everybody in the room, because you're here in the room, we're entering a new era, but how are these changes impacting activation landscape in Canada? And Josh, let's start with you.
Sure. There's some real secular kind of like changes happening in TV viewership. So if you think about the shift from linear to streaming, we're seeing that really accelerate. And what that's causing is a whole bunch of choice and option for consumers, which naturally lends to like more addressable video on demand services. And so for the first time ever, you have data-driven decisioning from an advertising perspective on the biggest screen in the house, right where you need it. And as an advertiser, that's exciting. That's the next evolution of what we want to see happening. And we did some research at Trade Desk about this, and we saw that from the 18 to 44s, about 70% of people have either cut the cord or intend to cut the cord. And what that creates in the marketplace is a ton of opportunity, but fragmentation. And with fragmentation is kind of challenge and getting the right reach and frequency mix that people are looking for. But at the Trade Desk, we don't necessarily look at that as a big problem. We look at it as an opportunity. And it's an opportunity because for the first time, we can use data to actually get at what we call like the open internet and really reach consumers in smarter ways, a lot of what and the Environics proposition is. And so we're excited about the AI capabilities, the personalization opportunities to kind of usher us into this new next wave.
Let's stay in the digital world. Jason, what would you comment on?
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, I had the fortune and good pleasure of speaking at the Future of Television conference last week. And it was the first time that it had been, happening in person and live in 3 years. And the first time it happened, it was a TV organization, 400 TV folks in one room. And this year when we were there, it was split evenly between digital people and traditional TV people. So this blending of, what is old and new kind of coming together. I actually believe exactly what Josh just said. There's a ton of fragmentation now. As a result of it, it is the changing landscape. Remember, the TV industry in the Canadian market is a multi-billion-dollar business. And what we're seeing is, the slide of single percentage points of 2% potentially leaking into the digital ecosystem is giving opportunity for digital, marketers, as well as technology companies like ourselves, to begin to play in that space. And we've taken the approach of, moving away from just like siloed channel executions and moving towards something we would call total video at MIQ, and that is across all screens, making sure that your video budgets are working as effectively as humanly possible. But the big part is hasn't even come yet. So there's a little organization that some of you may have heard of, Netflix and Disney, that are entering our great country and coming from the US with a ton of momentum. They're really going to impact and influence the way that we as an ad industry begin to activate in that space. So I think that that's probably the biggest change that we've got on the horizon.
Okay. Danyal, what are you looking at?
Echoing some of the similar thoughts as well. I think measurement, it's really the integration of online and offline measurement that's been the biggest and arguably one of the most positive changes that we've seen over the last few years as well. And then tying it back to the ability to measure brand and business results, and that's what's most important. And I use those terms very loosely and vaguely, and as they mean different things for different partners. But I think closing the loop, that's very important for us. And all of that has been happening amidst siloed measurement, fragmentation. So it's really encouraging to see that players from both sides, online and offline, are making efforts to bridge that gap to be able to measure and integrate. Because the biggest challenge really still is measuring that cross-channel passive exposure. And I think Jan briefly alluded to passive measurement as well. And that's, again, what we're all after. And then linking it across all channels. That's really the only way we can measure true incrementality, and not isolated ROIs that don't take into account channel exposure to other touch points. So we want that holistic picture and that integration of online and offline measurement.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, so I think we think of evolution, and we probably go back in the digital marketing space to 15 years ago, where ad tech started to come in and created a lot of different key pillars that changed how marketers think of reaching consumers. You think of targeting, you think of automation, you think of measurement, everything that was just mentioned. If we think of this from an out-of-home perspective, and then also lathering up to that omni-channel perspective, these three key pillars have really helped change the perspective of how out-of-home fits into a marketer's pie. I wish I could say that out-of-home was the be-all and end-all for every marketing dollar. It's definitely not. But when we're able to add key KPIs and help marketers understand the value that out-of-home can bring, especially if we think of using a Prism segment, or if we think of understanding that the data strategies that you're implementing are actually moving the needle from a brand lift study for out-of-home or on a higher level in an omni-channel. So evolution is obviously going to continue to help push all the technology companies, create much more value for the marketers at the end of the day. And our goal is obviously to try and move along with that as the needs meet.
Okay. All of you talked about measurement. All of you did, which I think it's safe to say the room, we appreciate that because we're about numbers and measurement and adding value. So this is a recurring theme. Would you say that this is one of your key elements of change coming into the future? Hands up. All right, I'm making you do it just because it's a large room. It's our biggest venue so far. So everybody put their hands up if you didn't see that. They did do that. So anything you want to add on that topic of measurement, just as a key theme for people to think about for activation?
I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, we think measurement as a retention piece, right? It builds more retention. It understands how clients measure and continue to build investment, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I wish we had it all figured out.
You don't?
But I think it's and I think Andrea, to your point, measurement has. I think we're trying to crack it for a while now, and it's still, we're talking about the future as well. And as we're going into it, we're still again the gold star of how and where we need to be and integrating it. And that's why at IKEA we treat consumer and customer insights separately as well, because again, customer data, while I think I saw it one of the earlier slides, it was CRM was a buzzword in the 90s, but I think we still haven't cracked it as well as we should. And then leveraging our first party data with all the wonderful ways where we can activate and measure as well. So yeah, I think measurement we're still probably not where we need to be. There are still a few gaps that we can fix, but I think two of the most important things are, one, again, I'll sound like a broken record, but tying it back to brand and business results, and secondly, measuring what you're activating against as well. So Prism is one of those examples, right, where you're, for instance, using Prism to understand, using Prism to activate, and then using Prism to measure. So you're not creating lookalike or proxy audiences, you're measuring against the exact same audiences that you're activating against. So I think as long as we're cognizant of those two themes in measurement, we should hopefully be able to crack it at some point.
Okay. Jason?
Yeah, I to build on that, the one thing I'd ask, because there's a lot of marketers in the room right now, is to not be holding agencies and partners accountable to media KPIs anymore. Danyal, you just mentioned business results, and I've yet to see the media brief that says, help us sell more cars, help us sell more tables. I would love to see that. So that is the overarching statement for the room. If we could do that, that would be fantastic. For me, it's about utilizing as many partners as you possibly can on the measurement front. I think right now what we're seeing is the utilization of one form of truth, and the rest of it is kind of held accountable. So I'll build on the TV stuff. We've been utilizing Nielsen and diary data for as long as I can remember. I started as a TV buyer way back when, and that was great, 15 plus, 20 plus years ago.
Be honest.
Yeah, more than 20
20
years.
plus years
20 plus years ago.
Not the only one on this stage, 20 plus.
But what we have found now is our partnership with Environics Environics Analytics, in addition to what we do with an ACR company called Samba TV that we work with exclusively in the Canadian market. ACR, very quickly, for those who don't know, hardware that is embedded into your TV that at a glass level can tell us what you're watching. In addition to the great partnership that we formed with Bell Media, we announced about 3 weeks ago now, we're utilizing all forms of these partnerships to begin to tell a holistic truth of what's happening in that landscape. And we're trying to marry it to the rest of the channels. We're not there yet, but the good news is nobody really is. I think we're making some great strides, but that's kind of the end goal, is how do we begin to tie this to business results rather than simple media metrics.
Okay. All right. The glass is going for this question. So there are a lot of discussions about the disappearing cookie in the industry. I was at the Future of TV, the Future of Television conference last week, and cookies were a conversation element for it. And it is been delayed a little bit by Google, but 2024 is right around the corner. It is coming. And it doesn't matter, because right now, already in the industry, we're seeing that cookie pools are already being to shrink because the industry is adopting more and more privacy. It's also impacting the ability to target device IDs because those pools are also shrinking. Now, a device ID, for those of us who aren't in the industry, that's your cell phone, that's your tablet. And when you turn on your privacy setting that says, keep my behaviors that I do on this phone private, do not share this information with anybody. This is our right as consumers and Canadians to do so. What you're doing is you're taking your live signals out of that audience targeting pool. And it means that that pool is shrinking. That's all it means, but that's what a device ID is. So with these shrinking pools, what do Canadian advertisers and media partners need to plan for moving forward? I was going to start with Jason, but I just ended with you. So I'm going to go to the trade desk, one of Canada's top 3 DSPs, and I want to hear your thoughts on this.
For sure. And I think a lot of times when we talk about cookies and this conversation, we think about, Google's upcoming kind of like deadline in 2024, which they just pushed out. But I think as a room, we have an opportunity to reimagine the whole identity landscape and not look at it from like a reactive perspective where, the goalposts are always shifting, but look at it from a more proactive perspective and really think through, if we were going to do this again and we were going to upgrade the internet, what would that look like? And I think that when we think about this, there's 3 core tenets. The first is that it needs to be opt-in. The consumer, to Andrea, your point, needs to be in control. And we need to build that into the core foundational DNA of what we do. The second really important thing is that it needs to support premium content. Like we really need to make sure that all the media assets that we have, that this country holds, is powered by data that's, able to be decisioned in real, meaningful, and actionable ways. And the kind of spirit of that is really to make sure that the third point is that it's omni-channel. We're not no longer looking at things in silos, like, hey, my mobile phone, my desktop, my connected TV, but how do I reach a consumer in the consumer journey across all of those different touch points? And you're really seeing the big media companies come up and say that that's exactly what they're going to do. And so, Disney recently launched or announced that they were going to support an industry initiative around Unified ID 2. And what Unified ID 2 does is allow you to really capture that cross-platform omni-channel story in a privacy compliant way. And just to kind of bring it home, there was a toy manufacturer in Canada called Coco Village who recently actually deployed Unified ID 2 on their strategies. And what they saw was a 40% lift in incremental reach, tying back to that story that, hey, we can now tie the dots between things, and then 1,000% return on ad spend. And so it's not just theoretical, it actually works.
Okay. Jason, you and I have worked together on a couple of initiatives around this. Do you want to talk a bit about MIQ?
Yeah.
Approach to this?
Yeah. The one thing I do want to hammer home is the fact that, we're all kind of at the mercy of Google right now, who continue to move the goalposts. And I don't have a ton of faith in the fact that, 4th time will be the charm.
I agree.
2024 is going to be the year that the cookie actually deprecates. From our side, we're doing a lot of testing as well with the trade desk in particular, utilizing Environics Analytics segment. So we actually did a case study that is branded with our partners at Dell Technologies, or Dell Computers, as probably you all know and love it. And for Dell, for those who don't know, one of the strongest performance marketers in the country. And what we found is when we utilized an A/B scenario, utilizing cookies as one strategy and a cookieless strategy, focusing primarily on the utilization of Environics analytics data, we weren't able to do these kinds of results, by the way, but 2x on return on investment is pretty darn good when it came to a cookieless strategy. So we think that what needs to happen now is brands need to continue to adopt. What we're seeing right now is a bit of recession in terms of, oh, it's sticking around, like we can go back to like a cookie reliance strategy. And we think that Google has been a bit of a pain in the butt in one sense, but in the other, they've afforded us a really long runway. We don't want to get to the GDPR compliancy issue where in October, November of that year, everyone was kind of scrambling to be GDPR compliant. Right now, we've got a great runway to continue to test and facilitate tests to assure that clients, media budgets are still working as effectively as possible. And that's what we think we should be doing in the cookieless future.
Scott, a lot of people would say at a home cookies, does it matter? So does it matter?
Well, the great news for marketers is that there's a lot of various different types of ways to still effectively reach your audiences and talk to your consumers that don't need cookies. And that's through programmatic digital out of home and out of home in general. If we go back decades, the nuances and the powerful, approach that out of home has offered marketers is the ability to reach a one-to-many audience. And if we start to think how you can continue to deploy those types of strategies, you can start to think of even powering it with our data discussions. How do we utilize a unified prism segment strategy, a data strategy? Out of home offers that opportunity. It also removes the one-to-one relationship that we're starting to obviously see kind of switch more to a one-to-many, or as Jan mentioned earlier, a postal code driven, and the power of what those postal codes and geography offer. Out of home is a geography driven type of channel. And so there's a lot of benefits that I encourage marketers to look into. We work with clients that have come into the out of home space after strictly being focused on DR strategies and are now coming into the out of home space to leverage a lot of these key pillars that we've talked about today, such as data, automation, and measurement. So I think it's exciting that we're starting to explore these opportunities and to continue to partner to look at some of that more omni-channel lens and specifically for out of home.
Okay. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, along with environmental, social, and governance, ESGs. These are acronyms we're all hearing. And it's evolving from being a movement and turning into becoming more of a policy framework. And it's really important in the Canadian landscape. And it's important to a lot of the businesses that are here in the room. Danyal, at IKEA, we're seeing your creative, we're seeing your advertisements, where you're celebrating the diversity of Canadian families, and you're leaning into the importance of environmental and society and sustainability. How do these themes impact you at IKEA Canada?
In several ways. I think it's giving an upfront disclaimer that being cognizant of the bias that I represent while working for IKEA, I still think they've done a commendable job at moving the DE&I initiative forward in a lot of the ways that we do. So it's really embedded in our internal structures and our external structures. We were recently also acknowledged and recognized by Forbes Canada as one of the best employers for diversity. And I think it's a testament in terms of how we look at it internally and externally. And I don't want to get into the criteria that was involved, but even externally in terms of advertising and our recent campaign of Bring Home to Life, where we're showing the new Canadian settle in. And a lot of it is backed by data as well. So New to Canada, which is one of your databases, so powers a lot of those insights. And it really matters because I'm also someone who's still newish to Canada, still a permanent resident, moved from Pakistan 3 years back. And I know we talked a lot about geography, so I can place it on the map for everybody later. But yeah, so I think that representation really matters, and we are relying on immigration as one of those growth pillars. And I think having that voice within the IKEA Canadian organization as well to then integrate it with insights is really important. And then the second piece, of course, is the environment and sustainability initiatives. And I do feel in the past, IKEA hasn't done a great job in terms of being transparent about all the ways it is moving the sustainability narrative forward. I think as an advertiser, it's imperative that you're building awareness and also being transparent across your value chain. So I think that was something that's missing. And we're launching a new book that speaks directly to that and talks about IKEA action plan, and not only the some of the ways we've made an impact, but also where we're still struggling. And I think that's equally important. I think nobody can claim that we've solved the climate crisis, and it's just having meaningful ways that you're kind of contributing towards mitigating your climate footprint as well. So I think we're getting better at it. We're not where we want to be. But yes, I think both those DE&I and environmental and sustainability initiatives are really embedded in whatever we're trying to do moving forward as well. And again, across the customer journey, across all touch points, whether it's delivery or in store, we're trying to integrate it in every possible way, and while still being affordable, which is a big challenge. So yeah.
Okay. All right, Jason. I know, because you have invited me to some of these workshops, that these are important topics for MIQ. And in fact, I got to attend one of your great agency workshops where you were working with the agencies to address unconscious bias in targeting. And you're going to be doing more of these workshops. It was really valuable.
Yeah.
Like, we participated, it was a great day. On top of that, you're speaking publicly on the role of sustainability and advertisers' responsibility with sustainability. And you've actually published articles at our community around this. Why is this so important to MIQ?
Yeah, I think it's important to us first and foremost because it's part of the fabric of us as a business at MIQ, all the way from our headquarters in London right through to what we're executing here in Toronto. On both fronts, it's also important from the advertising community. There is a lot of education that we're having to do in this space in particular. So when it comes to the DEI focus, we're working on something called unconscious bias, and we're moving towards a strategy and recommending partners work towards a strategy where we stop receiving briefs that say, I'm a luxury auto intender or a luxury auto manufacturer, and I'm going to target men 54 plus and buying the Golf Channel and things like that, because you're excluding potentially a significant segment of those buyers. What if there is a woman who isn't interested in buying, or watching the Golf Channel, but interested in buying your vehicle? You're missing out on a significant part of that. So what we're focusing in on is a lot of the stuff that Jan was talking about earlier, looking at psychographic, behavioral, contextual information that we get from Environics analytics and applying that to actual outcomes. So rather than looking at a demographic specifically, what we're doing is actually just focus on people who are more likely to buy that car. And on the sustainability front, this is a relatively new initiative. And the reason it's a relatively new initiative for us as a business is because the industry as a whole really isn't aware of this. And I'm going to spit off some stats right now that are probably going to, hopefully drop some jaws in the audience. But the purpose of it is to make everyone aware of it. And that is the fact that the internet and digital marketing in particular are responsible for 3.8% of the world's carbon emissions that are created. Now, that is just a number, and people don't think 3.8% is a lot. But when I put it in context, the aviation industry, so the planes, the great delays that we're experiencing at Pearson, transporting all those people, is responsible for 2.1% of the world's global emissions. So we are nearly 2x in terms of the carbon footprint that we're creating as an industry versus the aviation industry. Now, the thing that we're doing at MIQ is we're actually starting with helping with the measurement component of this. The measurement component is essentially telling everyone in this room right now that we've got a problem, and it is now our responsibility collectively to help solve for that. And what we're doing is not only identifying the challenge, but through the execution of media activity, we are beginning to optimize campaigns. So there's much less touch points in the supply chain to assure that we're decreasing the carbon emissions that each campaign is creating.
Jason, I'm just going to come back to this because I remember seeing this presentation and I had to noodle it. When you're saying digital and advertising is creating twice the amount of carbon emissions as the airplane industry and travel, what you mean is it might just be an ad on your screen and then you click and it goes to an order at somebody's warehouse. That order has to actually get loaded to the warehouse. It has to be placed on another truck and delivered to the post office. And from that post office, it gets onto another truck where it comes to my house, where I'm ripping the packaging off because I'm so excited that I just got that thing I bought at 2 a.m. in the morning because I couldn't sleep. There's plastic, there's peanuts, there's unrecyclable paper thrown into the air with great glee as I pull out my new t-shirt, which has a bunny rabbit on the front of it. I dance around with joy, but it's that whole chain of, I just thought I bought something online and I hit click, and it has an impact that impacts the entire world. Is that what you're talking about?
Massively. And it's actually even, there's stuff that happens before that. So the ad load itself, the call itself, the servers that are being utilized, the creative being generated. There are so many touches in the supply chain. And this is why, as an industry, none of us are really aware of it, because there's a lot more that's happening at the front of this before that bunny t-shirt even gets to your house and has packing peanuts for no apparent reason, by the way. That's exactly what's happening. So we're working on educating our partners in the space and utilizing measurement organizations like Scope 3. If you haven't heard of them, don't do it right now because we're on the panel, but do it afterwards during the break. Google them, check them out. An extraordinary organization that I think is going to really impact positively what we're doing in the space.
Okay. All right. So in this room, we have a lot of marketers, and some of them are ninja worthy in the digital landscape. And other ones are ninja worthy in the traditional landscape. And now they're saying, I want to go digital. I know this because a lot of people in this room have set up meetings with me for later on today to talk about how they can start doing digital advertising with our data. So what skills, what resources, what should they be thinking about if they want to start transforming into a digital advertising engine? And Scott, I know you're out of home, but you're digital out of home. What kind of skills and resources should they be touching base with?
Yeah, I think it really kind of starts from a foundational level, which is education. Learning about, new emerging platforms, understanding and really truly understanding the definition of who you're trying to reach and what does that mean for your marketing efforts. How does the ability to take a piece of data and let it inform your marketing efforts across what you're trying to achieve? What is that actually, what's the output for that? And so I think a lot of it is rooted in education, being curious, connecting and networking with people and attending great conferences like this one to kind of understand more ideas of what's happening. So education is definitely key. And from that obviously drives adoption, and you become much more comfortable with understanding what some of these concepts are, understanding how they impact the bottom line or what we talk about as a measurement aspect, if it's actually moving the needle. So I think that's probably one of the best places to start, is to be curious and to be open to chatting to lots of different people to understand what's going to be the best fit for your brand and what's the best fit to reach your marketing objectives. And so probably a great place to start there.
Okay, Josh, I know right now you're at the trade desk. And so if you are going to be doing digital campaigns, you are going to be interacting with a DSP. It is going to happen, guys. And they're not scary. They're lovely folks. What kind of skills and what kind of resources do you think they need to consider?
Yeah, for me, I think it's all about partnership. And when you think about how digital campaigns start, it often starts with data, whether that's like first-party data or third-party data. And we're super excited to partner with folks like Environics, on both sides, on the first-party data side with clean room technology, but also on third-party data side with the marketplace. And what we're really interested in is making things simple, automated, right? And so working with a partner like EA will help you get your data strategy right into the platform, but it doesn't end there. Then it's like trading and making sure it's delivering and all of that. And so there's like great partners like MIQ that you can talk to. And so we think it's an ecosystem approach. And at the trade desk, we want to enable that with great technology. And so that's what we're really focused on.
Okay. All right. This is the final question, and I'm not shortening it because we got a little grace with our intro today. Can you provide me with your golden nugget, your 1 or 2 golden nuggets that you want to leave with this audience here today around activation? And we're going to just run the line. So Jason.
Perfect. Jan alluded to my golden nugget, and no shocker because Jan says a lot of insightful things. But I think from my side, is in the face of economic uncertainty right now. It's very topical. I think we're all kind of talking around it because it's an uncomfortable conversation. I think right now what we need to do is be working with partners like Environics Analytics, research firms, technology companies, trade desk. You got some great representation here, to understand what the best path is for a brand in particular. More often than not, the CFO is going to be making these decisions. I had a great conversation just before the conference started around this in particular. And a CFO saying, you know, it's easier to just turn off our marketing. Well, the long-term impact on that could potentially be detrimental to you as a brand. So I think just making sure the easiest and best way for you as an individual or marketer to navigate that space is really, really important right now and vital. And to prepare for it. Don't be afraid of the conversation. It is uncomfortable. I think collectively we are in it together. That is the one thing I will say. It impacts everybody in the room. And I do, you know, they call them economic cycles for a reason. We will get through it collectively, but we need to be doing it collectively because acting individually, it just doesn't give you the vantage point that you need to be successful by partnering.
All right, Josh.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to reimagine the internet. Never before has this opportunity presented itself the way it has. And so I think across the room, all of us should just really take a hard look and say, hey, if we were going to do it again, how would we build it? And let's build it the right way with the customer in mind, one that scales and one that's omni-channel. And so that's what I would leave everyone with.
Scott.
Yeah, I think obviously with an out-of-home lens on here is to continue to think about how out-of-home can continue to play a larger role in your marketing efforts. You know, we talk about our partnership with Environics Analytics, the ability to seamlessly take those audiences and apply to out-of-home is probably really key. And again, it starts with education. And, you know, Jason's point there around partnerships, like how are you helping drive some of those partnerships to reach those goals? So that's
Okay. Danyal.
While you were asking that, I realized I haven't had breakfast and nuggets are making me hungry, and which is not healthy. I completely realize that. But I think we need to step back, strategize, understand, activate, and measure, and spend an equal amount of time on each of these steps. And I think we can probably assign weight to each of these. They're equally important. And I think if done right with the help of such incredible partners with you guys, I think we can deliver those results and fill those gaps that we are intending on doing that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to add one because I have an opinion too, as one of the experts that was just asking questions. When you are working with your partners and you're writing a brief for your agency, your digital team, your digital media partners, your traditional, and you have provided them already with your PRISM codes, you provide them with PRISM codes. That's how you find us in the DSPs. They're going to come back and say, why we need to open up the top of your funnel. Let's get to as many relevant eyeballs as possible. Consider leaning into the Canadian-driven behavioral data. There's a lot of data in the internet right now, but Canadian-driven insights to take advantage of that. And Jan was talking about that earlier on today. She talked about Clickscapes. We have new data sets coming into the market. You already have some of these data sets in-house. So think about it from a behavioral perspective, because it ties into the subconscious bias. Rather than saying, all right, why don't we layer in this demographic? I don't watch the Golf Channel. I'm never going to buy a car off of the Golf Channel. You've missed me. But what if you instead, why don't we target the mindsets and attitudes of Canadians that resonate with their brand and are creative? Because again, that data, social values, is tied down to the ground and it can be implemented in any of the DSPs. And in fact, is already in some of them. So rather than defaulting to what's easy, lean into what you already have in-house or what we have available for you to take advantage of for a campaign specific. That was my 2 cents. Okay. All right. With that, the panel, we all agreed. We want to thank everybody for listening to us about this today. We're very passionate and we had to run through this a few times to make sure we didn't run over because we could keep talking. And in fact, the panel will be available at the break that's going to be coming up shortly. Some of them are going to be here for lunch and I know Jason's going to be here for drinks. So please don't hesitate to come up if you have questions. We're all available. Also, we have teams here as well. And panelists, I really appreciate the candidness and your willingness to sit up here in front of 1,000 people And it was a great conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah.